It's my great pleasure this afternoon to introduce our speaker, who is Dr. Michael Durley. Michael is Associate Lecturer in History at the Open University in Ireland. He holds a PhD from the University of Illinois at Chicago on the history of Irish American nationalism, and his research interests are very much in that field, in the Irish experience in America in the 19th and 20th centuries, with particular focus on the development of Irish American nationalism. And among his many publications in this field are his monographs Irish American Diaspora, The Friends of Irish Freedom, 1916 to 1935, which was published in 2005, and his new book, which was published last year by Cork University Press, on Justice Daniel Cohalan, 1865 to 1946, American Patriot and Irish American Nationalist. And it's on that subject that Michael is going to speak to us this afternoon. The title of his presentation is Justice Daniel Cohalan, 1865 to 1946, The Making of an Irish American Nationalist. So what we're going to do is I'm going to now run Michael's pre-recorded presentation, and then as soon as that's over, we'll move on to Q&A.
Hello, welcome to my seminar today on Justice Daniel Cohalan, The Making of an Irish American Nationalist. In my seminar today, I'd like to focus on his political career as an Irish American nationalist. He was born in Middletown, New York in 1865 to Irish parents from West Cork, and he died in New York City in 1946. Cohalan was a dominant figure in the Irish American nationalist movement during the Irish Revolutionary period. However, until the publication of my biography on Cohalan, very little was known about him, except for, of course, his spectacular clash with Éamon de Valera during de Valera's mission to America in 1919 and 1920. This photograph of Cohalan was taken in 1911, just after his appointment to the New York State Supreme Court bench, and is available from the Library of Congress. Irish nationalists, including de Valera, often referred to Cohalan simply as the judge. At the time of de Valera's visit, Cohalan was leader of the Friends of Irish Freedom organization. We'll see later how Cohalan helped to establish this organization in 1916. The Friends of Irish Freedom, or FOIF as it was called, was a substantial Irish American organization. By the end of 1920, it numbered 275,000 regular and associate members. This movement, the FOIF, has been described by historian Alan J. Ward as the most effective propaganda machine in Irish American history. It was also the subject of my first book on Irish American nationalism, entitled Irish American Diaspora Nationalism, The Friends of Irish Freedom, 1916 to 1935. De Valera's famous remark about Cohalan, quote, "Big as the country is, it was not big enough to hold the judge and myself," end quote, is testimony not just to the rivalry between both men, but also to the standing of Cohalan within the Irish American nationalist movement at that time. In this context, Cohalan's biography is long overdue, I would argue, and it gives us further insight into the Irish American role in Ireland's struggle for independence. However, a biography is more than just a story of one person's life or political career, however important that individual may be. So I've therefore included in the title of my talk today the phrase, "The Making of an Irish American Nationalist." During the course of my talk, I will highlight how Cohalan's Irish heritage, developments in Ireland, as well as the American social environment and American political developments played a role in shaping his nationalism, and indeed that of the Irish American nationalist movement at that time. Now, it is important to note that Irish American nationalism did not appeal to all Irish Americans, and if it did, it often took different forms. Many Irish Americans, preoccupied with surviving in an often hostile social environment, took little interest in Ireland. Yet at times of political agitation in Ireland, as existed in the war, the Home Rule agitation, or indeed during the revolutionary period itself, significant numbers of Irish Americans did take an interest in Ireland. And of course, Irish nationalists from Ireland looking for funds and American political support were not slow to capitalize on this. Home Rule leader, for instance, John Redmond, had his own fundraising organization in the US before the war, before the First World War, known as the United Irish League of America. Now, I would like to first explore how aspects of his Irish heritage and background shaped his Irish nationalism. I mentioned that Cohalan was born in Middletown in New York. His grandfather, John P. Cohalan, from Cork McSherry in West Cork, emigrated from Queenstown, now the port of Cove, in 1848. As you know, this was the period of the Great Famine. John P. Was accompanied by his son Timothy, then a 12-year-old boy, and Timothy would later marry a young woman from the same area, not unusual among Irish immigrants in the US at the time, known as Ellen O'Leary. The couple went on to have a large family of 5 sons and 2 daughters, and Daniel Cohalan was their eldest son. Again, as with many Irish immigrants to the US, Timothy did well economically. He established a successful glass manufacturing business in Middletown, and that enabled him to send Cohalan and his 4 brothers to Manhattan College, a Catholic college in New York. All became lawyers. So in this regard, Cohalan had a privileged upbringing. He even earned a place on the Manhattan College baseball team, though he saw the legal profession as a more reliable means of earning a living. So, like many Irish Americans shaped by the famine experience, Timothy, Cohalan's father, joined the American Fenian movement and became an important Fenian organizer and fundraiser for John O'Mahony. Timothy's 1909 obituary in the Clan newspaper, the Gaelic American, has much more on his Fenian activities. So in a sense, Daniel Cohalan followed his father into the nationalist movement in America. Daniel Cohalan joined the Clan na Gael as a student in Manhattan College. Interestingly, his 4 brothers and 2 sisters showed no apparent interest in Irish nationalism, so his decision to join the clan was also a personal choice. Cohalan's talents as an organizer was recognized by clan leader John Devoy. By 1902, Cohalan had become chairman of the clan in New York. Devoy trusted him implicitly, and a lifelong friendship developed between Devoy and Cohalan. One a former convict, as Devoy, and then Cohalan, a New York State Supreme Court justice. Daniel Cohalan grew up in a household where the Irish language was freely spoken. According to his obituary in the New York Times, he was fluent in the Irish language. So this identification with the language may have contributed to his activities for the Gaelic League in New York. His files are in the American Irish Historical Society, and they contain several appreciative letters from Patrick Pearse and Douglas Hyde, thanking him for his financial support. Now, I'd like to turn next to how aspects of his American background shaped his Cohalan's Irish-American nationalism. At the height of his power as an Irish-American nationalist leader, Cohalan saw himself and was seen by others as leader of the so-called Irish race in America. Cohalan saw all Americans of Irish descent, whether Protestant or Catholic, as belonging to the Irish race in America. However, the majority of Irish-American nationalists came from the Catholic community, and it was with this community that Cohalan most strongly identified with. He was a devout Catholic and was involved in many American Catholic societies. This is a photograph of the family taken towards the end of the 1920s, Cohalan in the background. The two sons on the right, to Cohalan's left, Patrick and Florence on the far right, entered the religious life. Florence became Monsignor for the Archdiocese of New York, and his daughter on the far left, Aileen, became a Sacred Heart nun, and indeed worked in Ireland for some time. Cohalan's wife in the foreground, Madge, was from West Cork. His other daughter, Kathleen, was a librarian for the American Irish Historical Society. His two sons, to Cohalan's right, and Dan Jr. Were lawyers. And there's a strong link between the Cohalan family and the legal profession in New York to this day. But the photograph would illustrate his close links both to the judiciary and legal profession and also to the Catholic Church. Now, Cohalan, like other Irish-American nationalists, was clearly influenced by developments both in Ireland and the United States. The Catholic Irish at this time were legally white and had made much social progress since the famine years, yet they were not fully accepted within American society. They were often depicted in a negative way in newspaper cartoons or in vaudeville productions. This is cartoon from a journal known as Puck, and it portrays Irish women in a quite a negative way. In the early 20th century, the Clan na Gael often staged protests outside theatres, which portrayed the Irish in such negative ways. And there was also a view among some sections of WASP American society, WASP meaning white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, that the Irish were more loyal to the Pope in Rome or to leaders of the Irish nationalist movement instead of to the American nation. So Cohalan believed that the Irish in the United States could achieve more for Ireland as Americans rather than as Irish exiles in the United States. A common theme in his writings and within the Irish-American nationalist, within Irish-American nationalist publications, focused on the Irish-American loyalty to the American nation, particularly in time of war. And Friends of Irish Freedom literature often reflected this. This is a membership card from 1919, showing the links between the American Revolution, 1776, the Easter Rebellion, 1916, George Washington on the left, Patrick Pearse on the right. So Cohalan liked to project the Irish struggle for freedom against the British Empire in the same way as the same type of way as the American colonists struggled against the British Empire in the 18th century. In terms of American foreign policy, Cohalan was strongly isolationist. This was motivated partly by his fear of an Anglo-American alliance, but also by his conviction that the United States should not get involved in international conflicts and organizations. Another cartoon from the journal Puck, highlighting and reflecting the dominant social Darwinist racial ideas of the time. And this was something that Irish nationalist publications fought against and criticised. This one highlighting the common links between Britain and the white Anglo-Saxon race in America in upholding civilization. So Cohalan's isolationism would later put him at odds with President Woodrow Wilson's concept of a League of Nations. Cohalan believed that America could be drawn into support of global conflicts in support of the British Empire. And it's important to note also that his isolationism would put him at odds with Éamon de Valera. De Valera had a much more positive attitude of the League once Ireland could be a full member. Now, a few more aspects of Cohalan's career. After Cohalan graduated from Manhattan College, he became a lawyer, established his own practice, and like many of his peers, joined the Democratic Party organization, or Tammany Hall as it was better known. Again, Cohalan's organizing talents were recognized by Tammany boss Charlie Murphy, or Boss Murphy as he was known. He became associate leader of Tammany. Cohalan became associate leader of Tammany in 1908. And these Tammany connections led to his appointment to the New York State Supreme Court bench in 1911. Despite these American political interests, Cohalan also maintained his involvement in Klan activities. In 1903, Cohalan and Devoy worked together to launch the Gaelic American newspaper. This file is from the Irish, the National in Dublin, share certificate, which shows Cohalan as president at the bottom right. The Gaelic American was the mouthpiece of the Clan na Gael, interesting source on the ideology of the Clan. Not surprisingly, it put forward the cause of revolutionary nationalism, but it also upheld the interests of the Irish race, and that's also in the title, as you can see here. Now, until the outbreak of the war in 1914, support for revolutionary nationalism in the US, as in Ireland, was still a minority view among Irish nationalists. Most Irish American nationalists believed that home rule was the best solution to the Irish question at this time. However, John Redmond's support for the British war effort in 1914 alienated much of his support base in the United States, and that left an opening for the Clan na Gael to reach out to Redmond's a lot of middle class support base. That illustration on the right featured in an Irish American newspaper known as the Irish World, which had supported Redmond up until his declaration of support for the British war effort, but then it withdrew its support. So that created this development in Ireland, created a space for the Clan to launch a new open organisation at the Irish Race Convention in New York in March of 1916. This photograph appeared in the Gaelic American. It shows the massive crowd. 4,000 people attended the Hotel Astor in New York, where the Friends of Irish Freedom movement was launched. The FOIF was much more broad-based than the Clan and attracted both male and female members. It had branches in almost every state. Cohalan did much to, it was founded just before the 1916 Rising, not a coincidence. And Cohalan did much to exploit Irish-American outrage at the executions of the rebel leaders which followed the rising. His speeches were often recorded in the New York Times and the records of the British ambassador to America, Cecil Spring Rice. But once the United States entered the war on Britain's side in April 1917, Cohalan maintained a low profile. Now, there were a number of factors behind this. Cohalan and Klan leader John Devoy and Philadelphia Klan leader Joe McGarity had been involved in efforts to seek German help for the 1916 rising. Many Klan messages were forwarded to Germany via the offices of Wolf von Igel. He was then the German commercial attaché in New York. Tipped off by British intelligence, who could read the German codes, the American Secret Service raided von Igel's office just prior to the rebellion. And one captured cable in von Igel's office included a note from Cohalan to the German War Office calling for the landing of troops, German troops in Ireland, attacks on air raids on England to coincide with the rising. The cable wasn't released at that time, but mysteriously in September 1917, it did make its way into the New York press, and it was picked up by other New York news, other American newspapers. This appeared in the Boston Globe. And of course, this presented a crisis for Cohalan. He denied he had sent this cable, claiming it had been forged. Calls were made for his impeachment, but these were never proceeded with. He still had powerful allies in Tammany, and also the cable was sent in April 1916, while the United States was still neutral. It would have been difficult to make a case of treason against Cohalan in these circumstances. However, I did find a copy of this cable in German archives in Berlin, along with other correspondence from Cohalan McGarity to German officials. So it does indicate that Cohalan did actually send it. But all the communications, Cohalan's communications with Germany did cease once America went to war with Germany. And that brings us to my other point, that Irish America had always supported the American armed forces in American conflicts in the past. So to continue to oppose the war lacked credibility. In April 1917, in an interview with the Catholic newspaper, the Brooklyn Tablet, Cohalan declared that Irish Americans would be present in defense of the flag and support of American institutions. Posters displaying the actions of Irish American soldiers in action on the Western Front were later used to enlist support for Friends of Irish Freedom Victory Fund. We'll come to that later. That raised $1 million for the Irish cause in the after the war. So posters showing Irish soldiers fighting Germans would not have been used by Sinn Féin in Ireland, but such posters had much to do with Irish America showing its loyalty to the American nation. The poster on the left, American government poster hoping to attract Irish men into the 69th Regiment, which was identified with Ireland. While he would have preferred the US to stay neutral, Cohalan saw American entry into the war as representing an opportunity for Ireland. In his declaration of war speech to Congress, this is another publication from 1917, 19, just highlighting America's debt to Ireland and the contribution of Ireland and Irish people to America's struggle for independence, issued by the Friends of Irish Freedom. So getting back to Wilson, in his declaration of war speech to Congress, Wilson declared that the United States would fight for the rights and liberties of small nations. So that reflected Wilson's vision of a rule-based order which would ensure lasting peace, and oppressed nationalities would have their own states effectively. So Cohalan believed that Ireland should make its appeal and link Ireland's demands for independence to Wilson's pronouncements. So that would highlight how American political developments shaped the objectives of Irish-American nationalism at this time. During the period of 8th of December to the 15th of December, the Friends of Irish Freedom held self-determination for Ireland rallies across the US. Over 25,000 people attended one of the largest such meetings in New York's Madison Square Gardens. So such rallies helped to increase membership of the Friends of Irish Freedom. This is a graph which shows that at this period, at the end of the First World War, membership going up dramatically, reaching 70,000 by the end of 1919, and by the end of 1920, numbering 100,000 regular members. Now, that doesn't include associate members linked to organizations such as the Ancient Order of Hibernians. Now, in terms of stimulating this rise in membership, one cannot ignore the role of developments in Ireland. In December 1918, the Sinn Féin party won a massive majority in the 1918 election. And then the Anglo-Irish War, which began in early 1919, that was covered extensively in Irish-American newspapers, such as the Gaelic American and the Irish World. And of course, this was also covered in the mainstream media. So as part of his strategy to promote the Irish cause in the States, Cohalan and other leading Irish-American organizations staged an Irish Race Convention in Philadelphia in March of 1919. Now, this convention attracted over 5,000 delegates, and that included 30 bishops and archbishops, I guess reflecting Cohalan's close links with the Catholic Church. This included Catholic Cardinal James Gibbons of Baltimore. Here is Gibbons on the left of the photograph. The presence of Gibbons, he was considered one of the most influential Catholic churchmen of the time, represented an enormous coup for Cohalan. Gibbons had been a staunch supporter of John Redmond's Home Rule policy, and it took, it took all of Cohalan's charm to persuade him to attend. So his presence ensured massive media coverage across the US for Irish demands. The convention launched a victory fund dedicated to the Irish cause, and portions of this fund were later used to finance De Valera's tour of the United States and provide seed funding for De Valera's bond drive. From the victory fund, $250,000 was dispatched to Sinn Féin in Ireland. And in an example of the global reach of the Friends of Irish Freedom, money from the Victory Fund was actually used to pay the expenses of the Sinn Féin envoy, Sean T. O'Kelly, in Paris. Now, it's also important to note that at this time, Cohalan worked with Americans such as Senator William Borah from Idaho, who campaigned against American participation in the League of Nations. So that reflects Cohalan's isolationist views. Cohalan and Devoy, the clan leader, saw the League as a cover for an Anglo-American alliance, which would ensure the territorial integrity of the British Empire. Ireland's place within the Victory Fund were used to fight against the League, and indeed the energies of the Friends of Irish Freedom were used in this battle as well. The American Senate later voted against membership of the League of Nations, so America did not join the League in the end. The Friends of Irish Freedom was, of course, also focused on Irish issues. It financed the so-called National Bureau in Washington. This bureau printed leaflets in support of the Irish cause. These included 500,000 maps indicating Sinn Féin's victory in the 1918 election. These were distributed to so-called opinion formers, such as members of Congress, church leaders, university professors, and the media. So that harks back to that role of a propaganda organization for the Irish cause in the United States. The convention appointed Cohalan to lead a delegation of 25 of its members to meet with President Wilson. The intention was to present him with the convention resolution demanding self-determination for Ireland. The president had this, so Wilson reluctantly agreed, but only on condition that Cohalan would be excluded. According to a report in the Irish Times, Wilson, through a Secret Service agent, gave Cohalan 5 minutes to leave. Wilson disliked Cohalan, not only for his perceived dislike of the war, but also for his campaign against the League, which was Wilson's idea to some extent. Cohalan agreed, but Wilson too was unwilling to offend Britain by interfering with the Irish question. He viewed Britain's cooperation as vital in his post-war plans. Cohalan also applied pressure on Congress, and one of the most important resolutions in favour of Ireland was introduced in the Senate by Cohalan's ally, Senator William Borah. Borah's resolution called on the Irish delegation called on the American delegation at the Paris conference to secure a hearing for an Irish delegation of Éamon de Valera, Arthur Griffith, and Count George Plunkett. It also expressed sympathy for Irish self-determination. This resolution was passed by 60 votes to 1, with 35 senators abstaining. So this massive majority in favour of a resolution is itself an indication of the success of Cohalan's campaign. Now, de Valera arrived in New York in June of 1919. This is a message from de Valera praising President Wilson before the meeting. So this was covered in the Irish press. This was Sunday Independent in Ireland, which welcomed Borah's resolution. So these events were closely followed in Ireland. De Valera was impressed by these developments, and this partly influenced his decision to spend so much time in America from June of 1919 to December 1920. De Valera had 3 main objectives, as I would see it. Here's de Valera just after his arrival. De Valera wanted to publicize the Irish cause in the United States, which would in turn create pressure on the British government to reach a settlement. He wanted to raise funds for the Irish cause, and he wanted to gain American political recognition for the Irish Republic. Now, the first 2 aims of his mission were a success. The Irish cause received widespread publicity, as we've seen in the United States, and this alarmed the British government. Secondly, with the help of the Friends of Irish Freedom, de Valera raised over $5 million through a bond certificate drive. But his efforts to gain US recognition for an Irish Republic was more problematic. Now, there was a number of differences that arose between De Valera and Cohalan. I won't get into all of those. I devote 2 chapters to his relationship with between De Valera and Cohalan. But matters came to a head at the Republican Convention in June of 1920, where a Cohalan delegation and a De Valera delegation both appeared, each urging for the convention to adopt competing policy planks in favor of Irish independence. So this is the Chicago Republican Party Convention. 1920 was an election year in the United States. Cohalan's resolution was a loose wording in favor of Irish self-determination, and it had majority support within the resolutions committee. It was more than an expression of sympathy. The resolution stated that the people of Ireland have the right to determine freely, without dictation from outside, their own governmental institutions and their international relations with other states and peoples. In theory, at least, an incoming Republican administration would be pledged to pursue this policy plank once in office. In contrast, De Valera's resolution called for a recognition of an Irish Republic, and this was rejected by the committee. So following this rejection, De Valera disavowed Cohalan's policy plank, which had been accepted, calling it insufficient for Irish needs. So as a result, the resolution committee decided to wash their hands completely of the Irish question and adopted no resolution in favour of Ireland. So this was development. It was certainly welcomed by the British ambassador at the time, as his records indicate. Now, in summary, and I'm just a few minutes more, broadly, the dispute between Cohalan and De Valera related to who should determine the strategy of the Irish-American nationalist movement in the US. Some leading members of the American clan, such as Joe McGarity in Philadelphia, believed that the movement should lie in Irish hands. That was De Valera's position. Other followers of Cohalan, such as Bishop Michael Gallagher of Detroit, he was then president of the Friends of Irish Freedom, questioned De Valera's right to dictate policy to Americans. According to Gallagher, such a policy would only confirm American nativist prejudice that the Irish followed the instructions of foreign potentates. Now, in October 1920, Sinn Féin broke off relations with the clan and the Friends of Irish Freedom to form a new body called the American Association for the Recognition of the Irish Republic. But it's debatable whether De Valera really believed that he could have persuaded any American government to recognize an Irish Republic. And indeed, he admitted as such. This is a letter to Michael Collins, January 1920. Apparently, De Valera wanted Collins to go to the US to mend fences, but Collins wasn't too impressed by this. So just having a look at it, it shows that De Valera himself believed that it wasn't really possible to achieve American recognition of an Irish Republic, given the relationship between the US and Britain. And that such a recognition would only come in the case of a US war with England. Now, I would argue then that the real reason for the rupture with Cohalan lay in De Valera's unwillingness to be led by Irish America. In a public statement after the Chicago Convention, Cohalan declared that it would be inconsistent with my duty to become a puppet to be manipulated by anybody. it would injure our cause, even if it were to appear that I was a puppet. I'll just finish now with what happened to Cohalan after his dispute with de Valera. As we know, the divisions within among Irish nationalists in America were overtaken by divisions over the treaty in Ireland. Cohalan was predictably courted by the pro-treaty side, who recognized his influence. And Cohalan took a pragmatic approach to the treaty also. Like a lot of Irish Americans, he believed that it was a step towards freedom, as Collins put it. In 1923, Cohalan campaigned with President Cosgrave by air during the election campaign of that year. In my book, I explain why that was the case. After the establishment of the Irish Free State, Cohalan, like a lot of Irish Americans, focused most of his attention on American matters. So Cohalan died in 1946, and he is buried in Calvary Cemetery in Queens County, New York. Irish Celtic cross there marking his grave. And I'll just end with this quotation from F.S.L. Lyons, the famous Irish historian. He was reviewing a book by Charles Tansel on this whole period. And in this quotation, he comments on the dispute between Cohalan and de Valera. And I think the quotation is interesting in the sense that it highlights the theme that I've been looking at today, the making of an Irish American nationalist. Cohalan was not only motivated by loyalty to Ireland, but also by loyalty to what he felt were the interests of the United States and Irish America. So the story of Cohalan's life has much to tell us about the nature of Irish American nationalism during the revolutionary period. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that great presentation. Apologies again for the early glitches with the sound. I hope everyone was able to hear it all the way through in the end. So let's open it up for questions. I'm sure such a stimulating, a wide-ranging paper on such an important figure in Irish American history will stimulate a few questions. So let's start with Fergal. So again, anyone else want to raise a question, just press the little hand icon. I'll then invite you to contribute. So Fergal first.
Hi, Michael. That was really interesting. Thank you. I just have a question. It's kind of a narrow question, but I'm really struck by de Valera's disowning of Cohalan's resolution at the Republican convention after his own resolution had failed to win a majority. I mean, it seems remarkably destructive to me in terms of that presumably a significant achievement could have been made if Cohalan's agreement had passed. I don't know how realistic that is, but you might be able to tell me. And the other thing that strikes me about de Valera's resolution, the being specifically about the Republic, it seems very unrealistic. I'm just wondering how, what the political logic behind pushing for a resolution which wouldn't win so much support. I mean, I'm struck, for example, that probably one of the most powerful Irish American bodies in loose definition of Irish American would be the Catholic Church, and they were much more comfortable with the idea of self-determination rather than a republic specifically. So I know maybe I'm reading too much into this, but is there shades of de Valera's behaviour at the treaty split in terms of what seems to be a very heavy-handed response over quite small differences?
Yes, I tend to agree that it was an error on de Valera's part in the context of the aims of the Irish movement, but in terms of his own leadership, I got the sense, and David McCullough in his book on de Valera covers this as well, that if De Valera had gone along with Cohalan's resolution, that he somehow would have been upstaged by Cohalan. So that was an element. During my talk, I should have said it was De Valera that made that speech outside the convention about not being a puppet of Irish America. It wasn't Cohalan, but so he didn't want to appear as a puppet of Irish America. It would have undermined him. So yes, I think he was. Now, McCullough argues that it was to do with De Valera's sense of insecurity, that he didn't want to appear to be playing second fiddle to Cohalan. And indeed, many of many of De Valera's allies, Patrick McCartan, for instance, who was the Sinn Féin envoy, he thought it was a mistake for De Valera to go to Chicago, and Frank Walsh, another ally, likewise. So that was, I would feel, a mistake on De Valera's part.
Did Walsh and Lynch want to see the Cohalan resolution passed? Did they feel strategically that was the one to
I think McCartan spoke with De Valera in America. It's very much of a pro-De Valera account. So he doesn't go that far. But I think you'd have to say Cohalan's resolution would have been better than no resolution. Now, it's also fair to say that in theory, this would have committed an incoming Republican administration to pursue or uphold that policy plank. But Warren Harding, who did become Republican president, didn't really have that much interest in Ireland. So perhaps one could argue it might not have affected American policy to a great extent. But Bishop Gallagher, Michael Gallagher, the president of the Friends of Irish Freedom, he was strongly, of course, he was an ally of Cohalan. He strongly condemned De Valera, and he argued that the British government, following this rejection or this upheaval in Chicago, unleashed a saturnalia of arson and loot and lust on Ireland as a result. And in Ireland, there was an upsurge in security forces activity. So it's hard to draw a link there, of course. It's cause and effect, but I think it was. I would agree it was a mistake. But I guess it does underline the tensions between the two sides. De Valera had got an undertaking from Collins earlier that the Friends of Irish Freedom should be a subsidiary organization, that he was in charge. So that was, and whereas the Irish Americans, of course, felt that Irish Americans should be running things. So there was that tension.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Fergal. We've got a question now from Sean.
Hi, Sean.
Yes, Michael, I enjoyed that very much, and Cohalan is a fascinating character, and it's great to hear more about him. The only thing I wondered about is the implications, for the bigger picture about Irish America, because if I've got it right, when De Valera sets up his rival committee for the recognition of the Irish Republic, he's actually very successful in raising money in America, which would suggest that an awful lot of Irish Americans, unlike Cohalan, don't have a problem with accepting leadership from the Irish side.
Yes, no, that's a good point. Joe McGarrity, the clan leader, he supports De Valera, and many of I had a look at the statistics. A lot of the rank and file Friends of Irish Freedom members transfer their allegiance to the American Association for the Recognition of the Irish Republic. But a lot of the leadership of the Friends of Irish Freedom, and about 20,000 members retain their allegiance to Cohalan. the clan divides, but 5 of the 7-member executive side with Cohalan. Devoy backs Cohalan. So yes, I guess, and it is a big blow to Cohalan, not losing the confidence of De Valera. And as you say, the fundraising continues. But then in terms of the political contacts, I would see Cohalan as having a much greater level of influence among American politicians. So that was a factor. I guess De Valera saw Cohalan in that light. He saw his value as a political insider, but then he lost that when De Valera following the split. But there's certainly a division within Irish America. Others, Dermot Lynch, for instance, the National Secretary of the Friends of Irish Freedom, who had fought in the 1916 Rising, he sides with Cohalan. But then there are others who go with De Valera.
So if I could just do a quick supplementary, is there any indication there of a generational difference in terms of Irish Americans who've been longer in the United States versus more recent arrivals in terms of their response?
I don't like
people who've been successful in the United States, like Cohalan, versus people who maybe have been less successful. I mean, can we see any pattern in the different responses of Irish Americans?
Yes. Well, there was some regional. The New York clan generally stay with Cohalan, follow Cohalan. But then in Boston, the Friends of Irish Freedom desert to the American Association for the Recognition of the Irish Republic. In terms of age groups, it's possible that the younger Irish Americans might have been attracted, all right, to the De Valera side. A lot of the older Irish Americans would have been connected with Tammany Hall and with the Ancient Order of Hibernians. They would. So there possibly is a division there. It's something I didn't look at, but it would be worth pursuing. Certainly, there was actually, just on that point, there was these divisions didn't start with De Valera's arrival. Following the entry of the US into the First World War, again divisions emerged. And Liam Mellows, he was over working with the Gaelic American. He was condemning Cohalan for taking a very conservative stance during the war. As we said, there were a lot of reasons for that. And there was a new group called the Irish Progressive League, which was led by Peter Golden. And they attracted a lot of younger Irish Americans. There were socialists, there were more radical. They supported the women's pickets later. And whereas I guess Cohalan and Devoy were more socially conservative. And as I said, Cohalan was more Catholic. So the Irish Progressive League merged with the American Association, De Valera's organization, and Peter Golden was national secretary of De Valera's organization. So I guess that would be evidence of that it attracted a more radical progressive. The Irish Progressive League attracted suffragettes, socialists, anti-war activists. So there was an element there that saw Cohalan and Devoy as just too conservative, socially conservative. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Dara is waiting.
Hello, Dara. Yes.
Hi, Michael. Great paper. I really enjoyed that as ever. So my question actually builds on Sean's point previous, and It concerns the idea of De Valera almost as a deus ex machina in Irish American nationalism, specifically during this period. De Valera, of course, would famously remark that big as the country is, it wasn't big enough to hold the judge and myself in relation to Cohalan. I'm just wondering, given that De Valera arrives in June 1919, and it's rather unexpected, even Harry Boland doesn't expect him to arrive, what were the FOF's plans for the proliferation of Irish American nationalism and the propagation of the Irish cause, on the assumption that De Valera wasn't coming? I'm looking in particular at, De Valera's cross-national cross-country campaign. Was that something that Cohalan would have taken up in lieu of De Valera? So how did De Valera change the graph of Irish nationalism, so to speak?
Yes, that's a very good question. I guess Cohalan wanted to unite the Irish race in America. He kept using that term, the Irish race, and he felt that it could be a major force, and I guess to some degree it was in American politics at this time. So he wanted to mobilize Irish America. Now, whether he would have done, I think De Valera's tour was exceptional, and I can't imagine Cohalan organizing something like that. So in that sense, De Valera's presence did actually help to mobilize Irish American support for the Friends of Irish Freedom. De Valera was certainly a catalyst during this period in leading to the expansion and of the movement. Of course, the Friends of Irish Freedom did contribute to that tour as well, paid for his expenses, and the infrastructure. I guess it's a combination of De Valera's visit, and the Friends of Irish Freedom did have that infrastructure in all the different states, so that when De Valera visited Fenway Park in Boston, he could rely on the infrastructure of the Friends of Irish Freedom to organize events right around the US as the tour progressed. I guess Cohalan would have been looking at Irish American interests, like fighting against the League of Nations and what he saw as pro-British elements in the US. So there was. I did mention the League. The League of Nations was, in terms of De Valera trying to get hold of the leadership of the Friends of Irish Freedom, that was a factor, and De Valera certainly disagreed with the Victory Fund, some of the Victory Fund's monies being spent in that campaign, and De Valera wanted a more bipartisan approach. He felt that a lot of more could be done with the Democrats, whereas Cohalan was more leaning towards the Republican Party in the US at this time. I guess that's the only answer I can give. Yes. So in summary, I can't imagine Cohalan planning that kind of campaign. He did wind up the Victory Fund to make way for the bond drive. So if De Valera had not arrived, he would have probably continued with the Victory Fund. But the actual bond drive seemed to be De Valera's idea, and it was a bond drive certificate, I should say. So that too was an innovation that De Valera brought to his campaign.
Okay, thank you, Dara. Steve, you're next.
Thank you so much for such a giving such a context to why Irish diaspora in America is so successful. If you look back, there's so many presidents who have come from this piece of land. So as an Indian who's been here from the last 13 years, and I always wonder why Irish diaspora in America is so successful, and what makes us so successful. And I'm sorry, I'm just slightly looking at the whole storyline of what has happened in the past, and I'm contextualizing it to why I am on this particular seminar, and also try to understand how there were differences in the way two people were approaching, that is purely being American loyalist, for America within Irish the groups itself. And I just what I really wanted to know was, we know that at present Joe Biden is actually the president, and he's got Irish roots. Okay. And then we know, I know I'm slightly going off from the actual topic, but I just wanted to understand how that diaspora is still continuing in terms of whatever political stands or whatever ideologies that actually each president has stood. I come from a village where Chester MacArthur, who was the 21st president of America, was born over here. And here we are talking about Irish diaspora from a political point of view, and how things have progressed in the last 2 months where Joe Biden has come in. So I just wanted to know why Irish diaspora is so successful in America. And the second thing is, what are the different stands that two different presidents actually stood for, who came from the same piece of land, and they're I think centuries apart now. And how this diaspora is going to actually also sort of ignite a fresh energy now that Joe Biden has come.
Okay, well, in terms of explaining the influence of the Irish in America on politics, well, the Irish were, when they came to the Catholic Irish, that is after the famine and even before it, there was large numbers of Catholic Irish settling in the cities, and they did experience discrimination, but they were also familiar with the politics. They were English speaking, and they became involved in the democratic organizations. A lot of the Irish settled in the cities, and they were they developed these machines, as we saw with Tammany Hall in and Boss Murphy in New York in the early 20th century. So these machines were common in these cities which had heavy Irish settlement. So that would have given them more leverage in the American political system. Now, irrespective, there was, as I mentioned, discrimination, and in terms of the Al Smith's campaign for the presidency in 1928, the anti-Catholic feeling arose there on a national level. So while they were strong in the cities, they weren't as powerful on a national scale. But nevertheless, they're so American members of Congress at that time, looking for the Irish vote, would be supportive, say, of Bora's resolution. There were other resolutions in favour of Ireland, which were passed at this time. Obviously, President Wilson went against it, but they were able to exercise influence in American politics to an extent, and that has continued. Now, there's big debates over how influential the Irish are today. I would see, well, Biden obviously has comes from a Catholic Irish tradition, and he does identify with Ireland. So that does give Irish politicians here some heart, I guess. But I wouldn't see them as powerful, as influential as they were early in the city politics of that period of the early 20th century. But they are as the Irish have risen in the social ranks. They become more prosperous as an ethnic group. I find now that there are more divided. The majority of Irish around the time of Cohalan's ascendancy were Democrats. Now they're both Democrats and Republicans. Interestingly, I've corresponded with one of the Cohalan descendants, Peter Fox Cohalan, who provided me with a lot of documents and so on for my book, is a retired Republican state Supreme Court judge in Long Island. So even within the Cohalan family, there's a shift to the Republican side. So there is. It's now more even. I would say Irish America is more evenly divided. But even still, you have Irish American congressmen of both Republican and Democrats speaking out in favour of Ireland. And having an Irish name, I think, does still mean a lot for Irish Americans. Now, in terms of why are some American presidents for Ireland and others against, again, someone like Biden would have a sense of his Irish identity. But President Wilson, for instance, was at the time of Cohalan's ascendancy, he was from a Scotch-Irish background. Now there are allegations about whether he was anti-Irish. I tend to disagree. He was sympathetic to Home Rule, but he was an Anglophile, and he felt that Britain and the US should cooperate in the post-war period. So he would not have been a friend of Ireland as, say, later presidents. So like Kennedy or Clinton or Clinton didn't have Irish roots, but at least he seemed to be very much in favour of Ireland. So that's I'm not an expert on the current standing of the Irish in America, but I would see them as influential, but not as much as they were in terms of city politics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. So we're running close to the end of time. So I think we've got time for one more question. Kevin Rogers, you have your hand up. So do you want to ask the last question?
Yeah, basically, it's interesting. Joe Biden, Barack Obama has some Irish ancestry as well. Barack Obama did, didn't he? And so did Kennedy, JFK.
Oh yes, quite a lot of Irish American presidents had Irish roots, but I think the majority had they're from the Scots-Irish tradition, and like Jackson, for instance. Now, Cohalan, in his work for the American Irish Historical Society, dismissed the idea of Scotch-Irish and Catholic Irish. He felt that all Irish in America are part of the Irish race, and a lot of the Friends of Irish Freedom publicity celebrated the exploits of the Irish, Scotch-Irish and Irish. But nevertheless, there was in reality, there was a divide. It was the Catholic Irish that tended to support these nationalist organizations in America. And there was an element of tension between Protestant and Catholic. Now, there's some historians that go into more detail.
The Cohalans support Irish independence, like Irish Free State, more than the Irish Republic of Ireland. You support the Irish Free State. Do you like Collins more than de Valera?
Sorry, your sound wasn't very good there. Could you repeat it, or could someone else tell me?
I think Kevin's question there was did Cohalan indicate a greater degree of support for Collins and for the Free States,
yes,
as opposed to de Valera and the Republican side, I suppose, specifically in the Civil War?
Yes, yes, I did.
Right.
That's good. Yeah. I have 2 chapters in the book on Cohalan's relationship with the Free State. He supported the Free State. Now, it's been argued that that's because of his dispute with de Valera. Certainly, that was a factor. But I would also see a lot of Irish Americans, as Fergal was saying earlier, were pragmatic and indeed a lot of Irish Americans felt that the treaty was a step in the right direction. The American Catholic Church supported it. I would say the majority of Irish America did tend to support the treaty. So Cohalan reflected that, but that doesn't mean that he completely agreed with everything that President William Cosgrave, he was the executive president of the Free State, he didn't agree with everything that the Cosgrave administration did. For instance, he was very critical of the Free State application to join the League of Nations. And there is a file of correspondence between William Cosgrave and Cohalan in the American Irish Historical Society, and it shows the relationship was quite warm, but often critical. And Cohalan felt, and Devoy felt, that the Free State should be more assertive in their policy towards Britain. And he also felt that the Free State should trade more with the US and build more economic links with America and develop its tourism and so on. So he was quite critical of the conservative economic policies pursued by the Free State. And indeed, he went so far as to support Joe McGrath and the Army mutineers with funds in 1924. There was an army mutiny. It was a big crisis for the Free State in terms of partly to do with the demobilization of the Free State Army, and officers were, many officers were unwilling to take part in this, but it blew over. But it's interesting that Cohalan and Devoy and the Gaelic American are supporting this mutiny, and indeed, so reflecting their criticism of the Free State. But at the same time, they were never, Cohalan and Devoy never countenanced supporting de Valera.
When de Valera got in power in the 20s, was he happy?
1932, yes.
Was he happy? Cohalan spoke to him then, and then when the Irish became a Republic of Ireland in 1939, was it?
I think you're asking me about when de Valera took power in 1932. How did Cohalan react to that? Well, Cohalan tended to accept what had happened. He didn't object, and at that stage, Cohalan was more focused on pursuing American politics. He was also fighting the prospect of. He also was highlighting the isolationist struggle. He wanted America to remain isolationist in the 1930s. So Cohalan was much more focused on that in the 1930s. He accepted the transition of power to De Valera. I didn't point out, just as an aside, Cohalan had a house in Cork, in Glandore, which he maintained. He visited every summer. But in the mid-30s, he ceased coming to Ireland. I don't know if that was related to De Valera's, who was in power at the time, but he was getting old at that stage as well. But at that point, his interest in Ireland was quite minimal, and he would have accepted certainly De Valera's policies. He would have supported them. His more assertive policies towards Britain in the 1930s.
Okay, folks, our time is up. So can I, first of all, thank you all for participating and ask you to join me, perhaps by just briefly unmuting yourselves and giving Michael a round of applause just to indicate our appreciation for the presentation that he's given to us here this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Great, delighted to have the opportunity to do this, and best of luck with everything. Hopefully, we'll meet at some point in real life.
Real time and real space. Thank you very much,
yes,
Michael.
exactly.
We really appreciate you giving your time to join with us here this afternoon. Thank you all for coming. As I say,
thank you very much.
We have more seminars coming up next semester, beginning, I think, on the 1st of February. So look out on our website or social media, and Eventbrite, and we'll be putting up the links to register for those seminars in the new year. Okay, thank you all.
Good.